Alec, welcome back to
All
the
right.
Funny 115. Okay,
Oh, I'm excited. I'm excited. I'm excited with more of these. This has been very entertaining.
so we've done two before. If you haven't seen them, go check those out. We're doing these leading up to the start of our Survivor Panama reaction
hmm
series, which will be starting next week. So this will be our last one we'll do for now, and then we'll come back after that season at some point. Keep doing them. We generally do like 16 each video. So, but there's a lot. There's 115 of them. But it's been fun, kind of just reliving some of the some funny moments, some ones that we definitely remember. Like he lies, but he tells the truth too.
Yeah,
And
that's.
then
I
and then
was
some we
so
might not
happy
have
that made
remembered,
it.
which is funny because he's like, I'm not sure if I'm the only one who thinks this is funny, but there's a couple more like even in the future later in this list. There are definitely like ones that we picked up on too that we thought were
Yeah,
funny at the time.
good.
And
I'm glad. I mean, there's a lot. There's a lot to choose from here. I mean, we've only made it through like 40 of them so far, I guess. What are we at? It was 115. No, not even 30.
115,
30 of
yeah,
them.
30 of them.
Yeah. So
About.
yeah, there's still there's a lot. There's a lot here, and it's been fun. It's
Yeah.
been really fun. So
So without further ado,
yeah.
let's go to number 83. All
All right,
right.
you first or me?
It's you first.
Okay.
Okay, here's the other hammock one he was talking
Oh
about.
yeah, here we go.
Yeah, this is what I
Yeah,
thought it would
this.
be.
What? I'm just laying here in the hammock. Vanuatu, episode 13. Haha! I love this moment. It was one of the funniest scenes of Vanuatu. It was one of my favorite scenes involving Chris, and it was easily one of my first choices to include when I sat down to create the funny 115. I agree. This is exactly the moment I predicted it would be involving the hammock. There are several reasons why Chris Dougherty is my favorite Survivor player of all time. One of them is the fact that he sported a greasy red wife beater all season.
Time.
Another is the fact that he won the game despite impossible odds, and the added bonus that he really didn't appear to even be trying. And of course, I still say that Chris had the single best storyline and single best comeback of any player in Survivor history. So if you take all those factors into account, and it's easy to see why Chris is my all-time favorite Survivor. There wasn't a single moment of the Chris Dougherty storyline that I didn't in some way enjoy. That being said, there was one aspect of the Chris experience that I enjoyed more than any of the rest of them. And no, it wasn't the wife beater. You may think it was, but you'd be wrong. No, the aspect of Chris that I enjoyed the most was the way that the guy talked. You see, Chris had three very distinct traits in the way he communicated, and together they made me fall in love with him as a memorable Survivor character. And what were these three very distinct Chris speaking traits? The first trademark of Chris was that he was painfully overdramatic. And I'm talking like Al Pacino and The Devil's Advocate overdramatic. Hey, we watched that movie for the channel.
Yeah, we
We
reviewed
know
that
that.
on
We
the
understand.
channel. Wow.
We understand that. Chris's confessionals on the show were always about 50% more dramatic than they really needed to be. And I have to say, it cracked me up nearly every single time he started giving an interview. Because when Chris talked to the camera, he didn't just make points. No, Chris liked to use emphasis. Chris loved to share ideas. And Chris loved to stress important words in the middle of his dramatic sentences. Chris loved to add drama to the middle of his sentences, even if there was never really any need to. And whenever he did this, I would joke with my wife how funny it would be to listen to Chris say something that was completely mundane. Like, what would it sound like if Chris had read a grocery list aloud? Would he still stress words in the middle of his sentences, even if he was just talking about buying a jar of pickles? I always wondered if the bananas are in aisle 12 would sound much more exciting if coming out of the mouth of Chris Dougherty. There he is, making a dramatic point about bananas. The second of Chris's vocal trademarks that I love was his sing-songy Weasley Midwest accent. The way he talked was sort of whiny, sort of melodic, and it happened to sound exactly like one of my favorite whiny voiced actors of all time, Master Bill Paxton. Oh, Bill Paxton's great. Chris sounds so much like Bill Paxton when he talks that it's actually sort of creepy. They both have the exact same tone, the exact same weird cadence, and at times they almost sound exactly alike. In fact, the next time you watch the movie Titanic, just picture Chris saying all of Bill Paxton's lines, and I guarantee it will crack you up. Because I swear to God, they are almost the exact same person when they open their mouth. I can't do that. I can't do the voice that well. So, Rose, will you tell us about Titanic? But my favorite aspect of the way Chris talks, and the one that makes him a legend, is the fact that 99% of the stuff that comes out of his mouth is complete and utter bullshit. I'm not talking about the stuff that he said to us. No, in confessionals, Chris always told the truth. But when he was talking to other players, especially after the merge, it's entirely possible that every single thing that came out of his mouth was a lie. And I'm being serious. Chris may have gone 3 weeks in Vanuatu without ever speaking the truth. Chris got so comfortable with lying as the game went on that you could tell he actually started to enjoy it. You could tell that Chris actually got off on blatantly just lying to people. And in time, he basically just turned into one big wife beater wearing used car salesman. And by the end of the game in Vanuatu, everything that came out of Chris Dougherty's mouth was a lie. He managed to dump bullshit on people more often than a guy who was an actual used car salesman, Brian Heidick, in real life. And when you find yourself lying even more than Brian Heidick, then, brother, you know you have turned into something special. I can't believe those suckers bought that. Gratuitous movie tie-in. One of my favorite movie characters of all time is Simon, the used car salesman from True Lies. If you haven't seen True Lies, it stars Jamie Lee Curtis as a woman who's... I've not seen it either. It stars Jamie Lee Curtis as a woman who's having an affair with a man who claims to be a spy, but is really just a used car salesman with delusions of grandeur. Simon the used car salesman is weaselly, he's whiny, and he's 100% completely and utterly full of crap. Everything that comes out of his mouth is complete and utter bullshit. And guess what? He's actually quite a bit like Chris. Oh, and by the way, who plays this mysterious whiny card salesman with a sing-songy Midwestern voice? Which actor plays this character Simon, who's so similar to the winner of Survivor Vanuatu? Why, it's none other than our old friend Bill Paxton. It's the same guy who tried to raise the Titanic. Only this time he has a mustache. Take a look. Actually looks like not that similar, but not that dissimilar. I can't tell you how many times Chris reminded me of Simon, the used car salesman, during Vanuatu. Nearly every word he spoke and nearly every lie he told reminded me of something Bill Paxton would have said during True Lies. In fact, at one point, I half expected Chris to ask Eliza to sleep with him. And he'd coerce her by saying something like, "Not for me, do it for your country." Because if you've seen True Lies, you'll immediately see the parallels I'm talking about. Chris and Simon, the used car salesman, could have been long-lost twin brothers. "You won't sleep with me, Eliza. Please just do it for your country." So anyway, now, we get to the moment at number 83 on the Funny 115. It's Chris Dougherty's best Bill Paxton impression during Vanuatu, and it happens in episode 13. It's the famous Chris in the hammock scene. And it was easily one of my first choices when I sat down to create this website for the Funny 115. Oh boy, we're still going, man. I need to take a drink.
Yeah, you get some long ones in here. I think this is what he was like, what?
Background, we're in Vanuatu. We've now reached the final 5. And the game is basically broken down into pairs scoring off on opposite sides. On one side, you have Julie and Eliza, the younger girls of Camp Olinta. And on the other side, you have Scout and Twyla, the older women of Camp Olinta. Right smack dab in the middle, you have Simon the used car salesman. Chris Dougherty. And of course, Chris has obviously aligned himself with both of the sides. After all, why would we expect anything else? By this point, Chris had told every single player in the game that he's taking them to the final 2. Because, well, that's just what Chris do. So every single player thinks of Chris is on their side. Every single player thinks that Chris will have their back. And that's where we get this very amusing scene that comes towards the end of episode 13. Right before the final 5 vote, Chris and Eliza are discussing strategy. It's right before Tribal Council, and Chris is sitting there in the hammock relaxing. He knows he isn't going anywhere tonight, so he doesn't really give a rat's ass if he pisses off anyone today. He knows that nothing can hurt him tonight, so he's just going to relax here. But then Eliza comes up, and she wants to talk about her plan to blindside Twyla tonight. See, Eliza has been looking forward to blindsiding Twyla all game, and she desperately needs Chris's help to do it. So she comes over here, I think here, to start discussing the plan. And Chris, as usual, is more than happy to start conspiring with her. Chris assures Eliza that everything will go down as planned tonight. Twyla is going to go home. Trust me. So Chris is laying there, plotting some sort of malfeasance with Eliza, but what he doesn't see is the fact that Twyla is standing right there behind Eliza. Twyla has been standing here all along. She's been watching Eliza have this conversation with Chris, and you can tell by the look on her face that she's more than a bit annoyed by it all. There she is. Twyla watches Chris and Eliza plotting her demise.
This is so good. I actually, sometimes, I'll every now and then I'll go back and rewatch some of our reactions to episodes. And this one I watched recently with this scene, and it's so good because the camera just pans over and it's
so
just
great
on one knee.
Eliza turns around and suddenly notices this. Busted! As usual, Eliza and Twyla immediately square off and start yelling at one another. They've never particularly been fond of one another, and this showdown has been more than enough to send them into another of their hate-filled yelling matches. Eliza accuses Twyla of plotting against her, and Twyla accuses Eliza of the exact same thing. In fact, it's the exact same fight as we've heard nearly 100 other times throughout Vanuatu. There they are. They're fighting. Showdown at Alinta. Meanwhile, Chris is just sitting there laughing. He knows better than to actually say anything. He's just going to sit here, keep his mouth shut, and watch as the women all tear each other to shreds. Twyla continues to lay into Eliza and yell at her until she suddenly pauses and turns her attention towards Chris. All of a sudden, Twyla notices this smiling buffoon over in the hammock and realizes that Chris may have actually been a part of this. And that's where we get one of my favorite exchanges of the Vanuatu season. Angrily, and what's your part in all this, Chris? And what is Chris's response of feigned and surprised innocence? Well, I'm proud to say that Simon the used car salesman couldn't have phrased it any better than this. In wide-eyed mock innocence. What? I'm just laying here, in the hammock. I love this scene. It's the ultimate Chris Dougherty / Bill Paxton moment. Because there's no way Chris could have possibly been more full of shit. In the immortal words of Scout Cloud Lee, the bullshit was so thick at this moment that it was coming out of his ears. And there's no way that anybody should have ever believed him. But Chris delivers this ridiculous line in such a wide-eyed, innocent way, in such a sing-songy little Midwestern voice, that it never fails to crack me up. Why, it's as if Chris had no idea that what Twyla is talking about. Plotting? What's that? What is this plotting you women like to speak of? Chris practically turns into unfrozen caveman lawyer from Saturday Night Live. He practically comes right out and says, "But I'm just a caveman. I do not know of this plotting and scheming. Your word frightens and confuses me." There he is. I'm just a caveman. Did Twyla actually buy Chris's innocence? And did she actually buy this feigned, "I'm just sitting in the hammock" defense? I really have no idea. But the mock innocence in which Chris says it has always made me laugh. Nobody could have been caught plotting as red-handed as he was, and nobody would have ever denied it as ridiculously as he did. But Chris Dougherty tried it. He actually tried to play the "I'm just a caveman" card on Survivor, and it made for one of the funniest yet ridiculous moments of Vanuatu. Not guilty of by reason of just laying here in the hammock. There he is.
So, yeah, I mean, he did. He was like just goofing around with it.
Yeah.
And he was scheming, but also in the end, he probably always was gonna stick with Twyla and Scout.
Mm-hmm.
And so in that way, he does clarify afterwards. He's like, I was just hearing Eliza out. She was talking to me. I was hearing her out. So it's kind of true. It's not like he was going out of his way to scheme to her. He was just kind of coming to her, and he wasn't shooting her down. He just kind of had a way of being good on both sides.
Mm-hmm.
This is a great moment.
Mm-hmm.
All right, number 82, Mr. Heidick's Wild Ride.
You mean that's the plot of Survivor Thailand. It is Mr. Heidick's Wild Ride.
Except this is specifically episode 10. Brian Heidick was probably the coolest customer ever to play the game Survivor. The guy was calm, he was rational, he was merciless, and he was always very steady. Brian never seemed to break a sweat. He never made a single mistake, and at times it almost seemed like he was a cyborg.
What? That's like straight out of our mouths. That's amazing.
Yeah, if you watch the Survivor Thailand reaction, it was an ongoing joke that Brian is a robot. Okay, so, wow. See, there's some just what's it called when you both come to the same idea independently of each other?
It's like, I don't know. It's I can't. Yeah, I know what you're talking about, but I can't remember it off the top of my head. But
I don't know.
Yeah, no, that's what's happening here. That's amazing.
Years and years apart too.
Yeah.
After all, how else can you make it 39 days without once showing a shred of emotion? How else can you win Survivor without being the slightest bit in danger along the way? To tell you the truth, I honestly thought the guy was part robot. Oh, no, there you go. Now he even says it in robot terms. Mr. Freeze in the house.
I'm getting a phone call right now? Why am I getting a phone call?
There was, however, one time during Thailand where Brian showed the faintest bit of weakness. There was actually one time where he acted and behaved like a normal human being. And it happened in episode 10 on a road trip with Clay. Because it was on this trip that we found out Brian had a severe, debilitating phobia of elephants. Here's Brian's arch rival, his Lex Luthor. That's right.
Look how just he's like, well, I'm just here. I'm an elephant. Like the elephant looks like, oh, here I am. It's like, oh, it's terrifying.
That's right. Lord Brian Heideck, Mr. Freeze himself, was scared to death of the fact that he had to ride an elephant. And it was the funniest thing in the world because Brian was so stable and calm under any circumstance. It seemed like he could handle anything. But you give the guy an elephant ride at the zoo, and all of a sudden he turns into a nervous 6-year-old. He wanted no part of being up that high. He held on for dear life, and he rode the entire way with one foot out the door, just in case he had to jump to safety if something went wrong. Brian with Clay at the reward feast, he was still unaware of the horrors that awaited him. And there's Brian nervously asking the locals if this is safe. Hanging on for dear life. Clay doing an impression of Brian's death grip on the side rail. I'm not sure what was funnier about this moment, the fact that Mr. Freeze was scared to death of an elephant, or the fact that 5-foot-tall Clay Jordan was perfectly happy and comfortable sitting next to him. Clay actually seemed to be enjoying it. In fact, I believe Clay thought he was at the circus. But Brian, not so much. Brian just wanted to get back down on the ground. Here's Brian with one foot out the door ready to jump.
Yeah, he does look like he's ready to just bail. Man, I would have loved that. I don't know. It's funny how scared he was about it. But
I think I would have liked that too.
Yeah, though riding an elephant.
It is funny though, because you're not really locked in there in any way, right? So imagine
Yeah. But they're very they seem like very stable. I mean, they're very stable animals. Like
yeah, like they're
so
not gonna freaking kick up on them.
Yeah, no.
But it's just thinking about how high up that is. If you did just fall, it'd mess you up.
There was, but actually, this funnily enough, you maybe if they'd come across, there were some elephants that learned that taught each other in. There was a part of like one of those BBC nature documentaries that I saw. But elephants like taught themselves how to like stand up on their hind legs to like reach stuff in trees that's up really high with their trunk that would otherwise be out of reach. So maybe he. I mean, that would legitimately scare me if it decided to do that. But I don't.
Yeah.
Then I would actually fall. But an elephant doesn't seem like it would do that. So.
All right, number 81.
Here it is. Janu's final tribute, the Palau finale.
Okay. So when they're doing the trip down memory lane thing?
Yeah, trip down memory lane. I don't
remember exactly.
This is going to be interesting. I don't know. We'll see. We probably commented on it at the time, but I don't remember what it was exactly. This is one of my favorite moments from Palau. It also happens to be one of the most controversial moments on the Funny 115. You see, when I first wrote about this moment back on my MySpace page, I was barraged with emails like, that wasn't funny. Or even worse, that issue was just mean. But I don't care. I still stand by this entry as one of the most darkly humorous moments on the Funny 115. There's no way I could get through Palau without this moment just cracking me up. Even if, yes, I'll admit, it is a bit mean. But you know what they say, if you're making a comedy omelet, sometimes you just have to break a couple of eggs. And Katie's final tribute to Janu during the torch walk has always been one of my favorite moments of Palau. There's Katie doing an impression of Janu. Yeah. Okay. Does kind of look like her. To be fair, I've never been entirely sure if this moment was just Katie being flat out mean, or if it was the editors trying to make a point about Janu. I have no idea which of the two it really was. All I know is that Katie totally dissed Janu during the Palau torch walk. It was the only time I've ever seen somebody dissed in such blatant and inflammatory way, and the whole moment was so out of place that it makes me laugh whenever I watch it. I mean, seriously, who gets insulted during the torch walk? Has that ever happened to any other player in any other season? Isn't the finale torch walk the howled and revered scene where every player is supposed to get one final show of begrudging respect? Revered, I guess. There she is again. Looking back over the past 11 seasons, there are only 3 torch walk moments that stand out to me as having been somewhat appropriate.
Inappropriate.
Yeah, that have been somewhat inappropriate. The first inappropriate tribute was in Thailand, when the editors paid respect to Rob Spaknik by showing multiple clips in which he attacked other players. I forgot about that, but yeah, they did that. Yeah, he choking Clay. No matter how many times I see this, Rob's Thailand tribute always makes me laugh. Yes, here's how we will pay tribute to the guy at the end of Survivor Thailand. We won't focus on his big moment of epiphany around the campfire right before he is voted out. No, instead we'll show clips of Rob choking Clay and then tossing him into the water.
That's right.
Oh, and then we'll show Rob calling Clay a stupid hillbilly. I don't know about you, but that moment just brought a tear to my eye. Nicely done, Survivor editors. The second inappropriate torch walk moment happened during Pearl Islands. It was when John paid his respect to Nicole Delma by saying that she, quote, had a rockin' body.
That's true.
Very sweet. I'm surprised he didn't try to hump her torch immediately afterwards. But my favorite inappropriate torch walk moment happened in Palau, and it happened with Janu's torch. If you weren't paying attention, you might not have even caught it. It was the Palau finale torch walk. Oh yeah, that's right. They were like out rowing it.
Mm-hmm.
It was the 38th day in Palau, and it was time for the traditional torch walk. Tom, Ian, and Katie were expected to paddle out to sea in their canoe, say a few kind words about each player who had been voted out, and then drop their torch in the ocean as a final sign of respect. So that's what they did. The three of them paid tribute to Jolanda. They paid tribute to Ashley. They paid tribute to James. Hell yeah. Hell yeah. And they continued to do so all the way up through Kobe. All the players thus far had received one final, appropriate, and fair display of respect. Ian and Katie saying nice things about James. Tom chips in with his favorite James memories, saying nice things about Bobby John, reminiscing about their old friend Kobe. Aww. Like I said, all up through Kobe, all the Torchwalk tributes have been friendly and overwhelmingly respectful. All three players said something nice about their fallen comrade. Katie would just place their torch gently in the water, and they would all watch as their friends' torches floated gently down to the ocean floor. And that's when we came to Janu. You remember Janu, don't you? The moody showgirl from Las Vegas. The one who feuded with Katie repeatedly throughout the game. The one who laid in the hammock and moaned about wanting to go home for half the season. The one who ended up quitting the game on day 27. I remember her? Mopey McMopers. She is Mopey McMoperson. I think that's pretty fair. Yeah, that's the one. Janu was the one player that most of Karors didn't like. Here we go. Even though the Torchwalk was supposed to be the final place of honor, respect, and civility, it didn't quite work that way when Katie got a hold of Janu's torch. Because not only did nobody say a single nice thing about their sad sack teammate Janu, none of the final three players even said a single thing about Janu at all. Katie just grabbed Janu's torch, lifted it up in the air, and she shoved it down in the water as hard as she possibly could. It was so out of place in Survivor Torchwalk that there's no way I can watch this scene. There's no way I can watch this scene and not crack up. Gee, tell us how you really feel about Janu, will ya, Katie? They must have cut the part out where Katie actually drops an F-bomb as she does this. So did Katie intend to snub Janu so blatantly like that? Was it meant to be the harshest insult in the history of Survivor? Or did the editors just portray it that way so they could make a point and diss Janu? Ultimately, it's hard to say. Because on one hand, Katie never liked Janu much during the game. The two of them had multiple fights throughout Palau, and there's clearly no love lost between them. And besides, Katie Gallagher was always known to be a little mean. True. So if anyone would have attempted a blatant Torchwalk snub job, I have no doubt it would have been Katie. After all, that pretty much sums up the way she dealt with people all throughout Palau. She was known to have mean things to say about everyone.
Yes.
Yeah, she was not kind to people. Katie and Janu, mortal enemies. But on the flip side, I have no doubt that the producers weren't pleased with Janu's decision to quit the game. Yeah, this is actually probably why they did this. Mm-hmm. They probably hated her for it, just like they hated Austin. And it's possible that they didn't think Jeff had come down on her hard enough back during Tribal Council. After all, Janu's decision to quit was handled a lot differently than Austin's, and it's possible the producers didn't think it had been very fair. Maybe they knew that people were going to complain. Maybe they thought a lot of angry Austin fans would have demanded to know why Janu was treated with kid gloves. It was entirely possible that the editors made Janu's tribute seem less impressive than it really was, just to prove a point. Maybe they wanted the viewers to hate her. Is Janu quitting the game? Yeah, because I remember with Austin's, I don't remember I think he placed hers down. With his, I remember he literally tosses it on the ground. He lets it drop. And he makes a statement like, "There's too many players that have worked too hard to be here." Mm. So he dissed Austin on the way out, because it is like, yeah, it's a tough thing. Like I said, I have no idea what the real story is. All I know is that Janu became the first player to be publicly dissed during the Survivor Torchwalk, and the flippant way that Katie does that has always made me laugh. The shot of her just shoving Janu's torch in the water is so out of place and so unbelievably rude. There's no way I can watch it and not giggle. That's not supposed to happen during a Survivor Torchwalk. Why not just drop your pants and take a dump on Janu's torch too? Oh yeah, and the funniest part about Janu's blatantly rude torch snubbing? The fact that Katie goes right back to saying nice things about people, starting with Stephanie's torch approximately 5 seconds later. We love Stephanie. Stephanie was awesome.
Yeah. Janu, yeah, Katie was never nice to Janu.
No.
Always rough. I do remember it now. I do remember just...
Yeah, I do. It was... And yeah, I remember like nobody saying anything. Yeah, it was an interesting moment for sure.
That's the 81st funniest moment though over some of the really funny
Look,
ones we got.
I'll give him some leeway. I don't know if I would put it up there either, but I don't know if I'm ranking. I don't know if I'm. I think he said he was considering these ranked, but like
Yeah.
I don't know if I would consider these ranked really. Maybe, I don't know. It is kind of funny.
Right, number 80, Dara shoots down fair play. Okay, this moment was hilarious. Drake and Morgan square off at the end of episode 5 for the big immunity challenge, and it's the gross food challenge. The two tribes will be drinking seafood smoothies in which Jeff blends together 2 random items and they have to drink the result. It's one of my favorite gross food challenges they've ever done on the show.
That's a good. Actually, I agree. I think I like this one a lot too
Mm-hmm.
because it's blended. They don't just have to eat gross thing. It's like no, you got to eat a blend of something.
Yeah.
Which is gross. So.
Anyway, towards the end of round 1, John from Drake squares off against Dara, the cute mortician from Morgan. The two of them walk up to take center stage, and before the challenge can start, John suggests that Dara kiss him beforehand for good luck. We should kiss first. Dara, being a respectable Southern lady, politely declines. No thanks, John. That's okay. Now, Jeff Probst obviously can't pass this moment up. He knows a good setup when he sees one. So he turns to Dara and asks, Dara, outside the game, what chance would John have with you? Assuming you didn't have a boyfriend, what are the odds you'd ever go for someone like John? John preening while awaiting her response. And Dara times her response perfectly. So what are the odds that she'd ever go for a guy like John? None. There's Austin laughing at Dara's answer. There's Rhino cracking up as well. It's one of my favorite scenes in Pearl Islands. Everyone on the Morgan tribe busts up laughing, and John gets a wounded look on his face. So Dara tries to apologize. She says, no offense. This sort of makes it even worse, because then Rupert mocks John from the sideline. No offense, but none.
That's so Rupert.
No offense, John. Just for that, I'm going to vote you out of the final 4. Cheers. Yes, I'll say right now, this isn't the only time that Johnny Fairplay gets smacked down by a woman on the Funny 115. That sort of thing actually seemed to happen a lot during Pearl Islands, and I think every single moment will wind up making the countdown.
Hell yeah. Here we go. Hell yeah.
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 I wonder if we'll have Johnny Fairplay ordering for Lil and Dara.
And then both liking it. They're both like, I love when a man takes charge. I was like, what?
Number 79.
All right. Boston Rob slams the Rotus. Marquesas episode 4. On day 10 in Marquesas, Rob Mariano was switched over to the Love Tribe of Rotu. And it's safe to say he wasn't very happy about it. Why do I say this? Well, because his first move is to sit down with one of the most mean-spirited yet funny interviews in Survivor history. Rob basically shredded everybody on this new tribe, and he didn't try to spare anyone's feelings in the process. There he is, Rob being switched over to Rotu. Rob's confessional about Rotu was quite infamous back in 2002 because everybody on the internet was talking about it, and usually not in a good way. Mm-hmm. And even though it offended a lot of people, I'm still putting it on the list just on principle alone. Rob's confessional about the Rotus was a notable and funny moment in one of the funniest overall seasons, Marquesas, and there are several reasons why it deserves to be included on this list. This is a great moment. I just completely unlocked this memory, and I remember this now. For one, it was one of the harshest and most blunt confessionals we've ever seen in Survivor. It was mean, it was offensive, it was personal, and it really only could have come from Boston Rob. Rob Mariano was always the king of the personal attack. Secondly, this confessional came directly after the Marquesas twist, and right before the Rotus ganged up and took out Gabriel. So even though Rob made some direct and mean personal attacks, it sort of felt justified at the time because the Rotus were about to pull off one of the biggest asshole moves of all time, taking out Gabe. So the timing of it all couldn't have worked out better. Rob would have taken a lot more heat if the Rotus hadn't ended up turning on one another in the same episode. And finally, the third reason this moment was significant was because it was the first truly mean confessional in Survivor history. Oh, sure, there have been a few bitchy interview comments made in earlier seasons. Borneo, it's Colleen. Go get your liposuction, Rich. Australia, Varner. That's classic Mike. He's an idiot. Africa, Kelly. Frank is antisocial and weird, but I feel like they have prescription medications to counter all that. That's mean. That's great. All of these comments have been snippy and funny little one-liners. Rob's confessional took the cake as the first flat-out mean personal attack in Survivor history. Plus, it was the first time that a player actually insulted every single person on his new tribe. When I first heard these words coming out of Rob's mouth, my first impression was, damn, he's going to be hating life at the reunion show. It was the first time that I thought a player said something he was really going to regret. In fact, all throughout this confessional, I remember thinking they're just sitting there thinking just one word. Ouch. Here is Boston Rob gleefully tearing into the new Rotus. So anyway, here's Boston Rob's infamous confessional about the Rotus. This came at the start of the 4th episode, right after Rob was switched over to the Love Tribe. I think it's to say that he wasn't all that pleased with his new tribesmates. Gabe is definitely a brainiac. Probably thinks he's a lot smarter than he really is. When I first saw John, I knew he was a big-time queer.
Yeah.
He seems rough and tough over here, but he does all the cooking, so won't be sleeping next to him.
Okay, yeah.
Not the first night, anyway. That's awful.
Yes, yeah, that's probably the worst thing Boston Rob said.
Yeah.
Huh?
Yeah. I like how he does add that, not the first night anyway. Maybe I'll cozy up to him after that.
Right?
The general is big and tough and wants everybody to know that. He's probably got a little sausage grin. Tammy's engaged. There's not too much hope there. And Zoe laughs. Come on. Without a doubt, Zoe's the toughest guy on this tribe. I'm sitting there watching this confessional and thinking, did Rob really just say that on national TV? Because remember that while mean confessionals seem perfectly acceptable now, back in 2002 there had never been anything like this before on Survivor. Players didn't just routinely blast one another to be mean. Usually they did it for a reason. I mean, my gosh, Bosch set off a flurry of angry message boards posts in 2000 just by saying, I like the queer, he's good. And that was Rudy trying to give a compliment. So you can imagine the reaction from angry viewers when Rob insulted the sexuality of both John and Zoe in the same interview, and he accused the general of having a little dick. Good Lord, I honestly thought that Rob was going to wind up dead at the Marquesas reunion show. I thought he would end up being the first Survivor post-game casualty. There is Rob Mariano, mudslinger. So here's to Rob's famous confessional about the Rotus. It either made you laugh because you thought it was funny, or made you laugh because you couldn't believe what you were hearing. But in either case, it just makes the list for this historical value alone. Oh, and also for the fact that I could always picture Rob's mom sitting at home watching this episode for this first time and saying to herself, oh, honey, no. Yeah, that's right. Boy.
I mean, yeah.
Some good old-fashioned...
But yeah, Marquesas, Rob was coming on strong as like a really strong presence in confessionals for sure. When there was like not many of those before. You know, you had like Richard Hatch in the first season had good confessionals. Colby had some like fun personal confessionals in Australia, but then Rob's like the first one to really just like take charge.
He's laying into people like really. Yeah, these are actually like legitimately mean. I mean, like calling a guy a queer in a confessional is like that's not a good look, Rob.
I don't think we've heard that word since that I can remember. So
I don't know. I know.
I think Rob retired that word.
Stephanie retired the word in Survivor. Stephanie called Bobby John gay. She called him gay at one point.
Yeah.
But I don't remember. Yeah, there you go. He retired. He used the word once and retired.
Yeah.
He got it retired. Well, Rudy used it too, but
I
like the queer. He's good. That's where he tried to give a compliment. It's like, I like the guy.
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
It's fun, though. It's fun.
Yeah.
You know.
It's a time capsule, you know?
It's
like, you can't say that on TV anymore. Probably, with good reason.
You probably wouldn't. You'd like to think he wouldn't say it now.
I'd like to think he's matured as an individual and wouldn't say that now, but...
Number 78, Bye Denver Diva. Okay.
we named that episode I think, right?
Yeah, one of the episodes is named that. Yeah, episode 4 of our Thailand reactions is named Bye Denver Diva, of course. All right, Clay Jordan, there he is. Clay gets the SmackDown treatment, and this time it doesn't even involve being choked by Rob. This is one of my all-time favorite tribal council moments, mainly because it's the first time Jeff ever berated someone for doing something stupid.
Yep,
I agree. By the 5th season, the players were starting to get creative with their tribal council ballots. They weren't always just writing a person's name down anymore. Sometimes they would write nicknames, Tennessee. Sometimes they would use abbreviations, CB. Sometimes they would write ancient Sanskrit, and sometimes they would even use hieroglyphics. In other words, the players were starting to get a little bit clever. And I think it was starting to get under Jeff's skin. You see, the moment that Jeff had to decode the name on a ballot was the moment that he started to get annoyed with this practice, because this wasn't as simple as Sue misspelling every single name, Dirk, Jervis, and Borneo. By the 5th season, Jeff was actually having to interpret things, and it got worse and worse until he finally snapped. The big moment for Jeff during the 4th Tribal Council in Thailand, when he actually yelled at Clay for using a nickname he didn't understand.
It's great.
There's Gandia Johnson, the Denver Diva. The intended target, Tribal Council number 4, was supposed to be Chewy Gon's drama queen / tree hitter / grindy, Gandia Johnson.
Grindy.
Yeah.
Oh,
she was
man.
from Colorado. She considered herself a diva, and thus she was known around camp as the Denver Diva. And when Chewy Gon went to Tribal Council on day 12, Clay decided to be cute and write that nickname down on the ballot. Instead of Gandia, he wrote down Bye Bye Denver Diva. Well, needless to say, Jeff wasn't amused. He clearly had no idea Gandia was called the Denver Diva, and when he pulled the ballot out of the urn, he just stared at it blankly for a few seconds. He had no idea what this ballot was supposed to say. Denver Pile? WTF? And that's when he finally spoke. For the first time ever, I have no idea who a ballot is for. Who wrote Bye Bye Denver Diva? Clay had no choice but to fess up. It's supposed to be for Gandia. And Jeff got a chance to scold the guy on national TV. In the future, guys, just write down a player's name on your ballot. Enough with the nicknames. There's Clay's embarrassed reaction. Bye Bye Denver Diva. Don't karate punch any trees on your way out. So anyway, that was that. Clay became the recipient of the first ever Tribal Council Smackdown. On film, anyway. There are rumors that Jeff yells at people all the time when the cameras are off. And that was the last time anyone ever tried to use a fancy nickname on their ballot. The lesson here, as always, you don't cross the ropes. That's how Clay do. Yeah, I've heard that as well, that Jeff's had moments where he'd just like be furious with people for like...
it does not shock me.
Apparently he get mad with Brian a lot at Tribal Council because he wouldn't like give him good answers to his questions because he didn't want to give away anything. So he wouldn't answer his questions the way he'd like him to in Tribal Council, so they'd be butting heads a lot.
No, that doesn't surprise me. Oh, that's what I mean, because like he's having to deal with so many different personalities and so many different people, and it's not scripted, right? There's not like you can't just be actors. You can't put on like an actor hat and be like, it's like I can get over our differences and be an actor. It's like, no, there are going to be people that Jeff hates that are on there that he has to somehow interact with, and yeah, it doesn't surprise me that he's yelled at people before.
Yeah.
That doesn't surprise me in the least, because that would happen to me too. I would yell at people all the time, probably. Like, shut up and answer my question, Brian, you cyborg.
So yeah, we remember Bye Bye Denver Diva for sure.
Oh,
Yeah.
Big time, yeah.
All right, number 77.
Chad has a leg up on Chris.
Yeah, I do remember this one.
Yeah, this is a great moment that I had completely forgotten about until I went back to rewatch Vanuatu. It is one of the all-time best oops moments in Survivor history, and I have to thank a reader named Michelle for reminding me about it. Nice catch, Michelle. It's the 4th day after the merge, and the men of the Lepevi realize that they are in big trouble. Rory was just voted out the night before, and that makes the gender tally 6 women against 3 men. And in a gender-based season like Vanuatu, that ain't good news. Chris, Chad, and Sarge are doomed, and pretty much everybody knows it. In fact, the only real mystery remaining is what order the 3 men are going to be voted out. And who will be the last man standing of the 3? Will it be Chad, will it be Chris, or will it be Sarge? There's Chad and Chris discussing their inevitable fate. So anyway, Chad and Chris are sitting on the beach discussing this topic, and Chris accidentally uses a phrase he probably should have stayed away from. Chris states that he believes he'll be the first one to go because, and I quote, "I think both of you have a leg up on me." Chris continues making this point until he suddenly pauses and realizes what he just said. Did he just say the guy with one leg has a leg up on him? Really? Meanwhile, Chad begins to crack up as Chris immediately starts apologizing. Dude, I didn't mean to say that. I'm so sorry. Chad begins to joke about all the leg jokes he can make, and it's clear that he isn't offended. But it's quite obvious that Chris is mortified. He can't believe that just came out of his mouth. And like I said, it's one of the single greatest oops moments in Survivor history. If you ever watch Vanuatu again and see the scene play out, I guarantee that you are going to laugh. I can't believe I said that dude has had a leg up on me.
Yeah,
Yeah,
Fun,
that's
fun little
that's a
move
fun moment.
for sure.
The thing that I always like about moments like that, where it's just like you can tell that like there is at least some sort of a bond with people in moments like that, because it's like it's just a normal slip up, slip of the tongue
Yeah,
there, the phrasing, and but like they're just so like, oh, it's embarrassing, but like he's just good natured about it, and
yeah, it's a purely fun, lighthearted
yeah,
moment. Yeah.
yeah.
All right, number 76. I will always wave my finger in your face. That's
Oh,
right.
here we go.
Alicia coming in
Yeah.
number 76 from Australia, episode 5. This is one of the most memorable phrases in Survivor history. The only problem is that people eventually got sick of it. You see, the Alicia finger wave was so famous and so overplayed back in 2001 that eventually it turned into a cliche. Because you have to remember this was back when 40 million people watched the show. Survivor was everywhere, everybody talked about it, and so when a great quote comes along like, I will always wave my finger in your face, inevitably it's going to run into the ground. And that's exactly what happened. We saw so many clips of Alicia waving her finger in Kimmy's face that eventually it started to lose its appeal. In other words, it went from funny to overrated very, very fast. Because just like any great comedic moment, the finger wave was only funny up through about the 300th viewing on TV. I was actually a little leery about including this moment for that very reason. Did I really want to include the finger wave? Was it really that funny at the time? Or was it a little overrated because Survivor used to be such a big deal? How did it stack up against the funnier Survivor moments after Australia? So I sat down and I watched. And damn it, I enjoyed. Alicia's finger wave is still one of the funniest things to happen on Survivor. It's not the funniest, obviously, or else I would have ranked it higher, but it still holds up well over time. So I don't care if it was overplayed or if people got sick of it. I will always wave my finger in your face is still one of the all-time best Survivor quotes, and the fact that it was ad-lib just makes it even better. Need a review of the famous Kimmy Alicia fight and Alicia's famous wagging finger? Here's the blow-by-blow recap, complete with screen caps.
Oh yeah.
Kucha had won some chickens as a reward back in episode 4. And once you go dark meat, you don't ever go back. But the problem is that Kimmy is a vegetarian and she isn't really thrilled with the idea that the chickens are going to be eaten. Kimmy is an animal lover, you see. In fact, when she was younger, she used to have a pet chicken named Henrietta. Oh, and by the way, it certainly doesn't help that the producers named one of the chickens Henrietta just to mess with her. Look it up. It is true. Oh, wow. How do you name how did the producers name one of the chickens? Like, just like, this is its name.
No, it says right next sentence.
One of the chickens actually has a name tag that says Henrietta. Sadistic Survivor producers rule. Okay.
That's amazing. That's so mean. Oh my gosh.
I didn't know that.
Wow.
So anyway, Kimmy is against eating the chickens, and Alicia is just against Kimmy in general. So things are bound to come to a head eventually. Alicia isn't one who can keep her mouth shut about people she thinks are ridiculous. The big fight takes place at the start of episode 5. Kimmy makes some comment about how the tribe shouldn't eat a chicken every day. Instead, they ought to spread them out over a week or so. And Alicia, of course, doesn't want to hear it. We need protein every day, Kimmy. That's ridiculous. I'm just saying that if you wait a few days between chickens, you'll be stronger. Kimmy and Alicia continue this debate for a while until Alicia gets tired of it. So she walks out of the shelter, only to hear Kimmy say in response, "Geez, what's up your butt today?" Alicia, "Excuse me? Excuse me? Do you have some sort of a problem with me?" "Yes, I do." "Oh, really?" The two women start a second argument at this point, and this is where it starts to get heated. This is where Alicia's finger comes out for the first time. "I'm not getting emotionally attached to the chickens. I'm just saying you should spread out the protein and not eat it all at once." The finger wave. A side view of the famous finger wave. Poor Elizabeth looked like a diver trapped in a shark cage. The fight goes on for a few more minutes until Alicia finally gets tired of it. So like before, she turns around and storms off, but not before Kimmy can get one last word in edgewise. "Don't wave your finger in my face." And then the coup de grace. "I will always wave my finger in your face." Sorry, but that's just funny. What a wonderful ad-lib. And I don't know what's funnier. Is it the idea that Alicia literally will always wave her finger in Kimmy's face, like at her wedding, or at the birth of Kimmy's child, or even her funeral? Does Alicia intend to show up at all these events and wave the finger in her face? After all, that's what she promised she would do. Did Alicia walk up to Kimmy's apartment on 9/11 and wave the finger in her face? I'd like to think that didn't happen, but then again, with Alicia, you never know. Maybe it did. The second funny thing about this moment is the fact that Jeff Varner started this fight and then walked away. They even comment on it on the Australia DVD. Varner started the fight between Alicia and Kimmy, then he left before you could see the end result. In fact, you can even see Varner hightailing it out of there on some of the vid caps. Here's the guy walking away quickly in the background.
It's amazing.
Or maybe the funniest thing about this fight was the reaction of the Kucha members directly afterwards. Mike Skupin's expression in particular is priceless. Nick reacts to the fight. Mike has no comment. So anyway, that's Alicia's famous finger wave, as well as one of my favorite angry ad-libs of all time. I don't care if it got overplayed. This moment is still funny as hell. I will always wave the screen cap in your face. Oh.
That's right. She was very serious about it too. I will always.
In that moment, probably single-handedly got her in All-Stars.
Yeah. Yeah, probably it did.
Which is sad, but.
Yeah. Which is sad.
Good moment.
Yeah.
Number 75.
It was clearly a huge moment even at the time. So.
Yeah.
Helen squares off against Brian, the Thailand finale. You notice that the list has been incredibly male-dominated up to this point. Sorry about that. I didn't mean for it to work out that way. Maybe it's just because males on the show tend to be more over the top than the females. I don't know. But in any case, I realize that this list has mostly been populated by males. At least up until now. Our entry at number 75 is dedicated to one of my favorite players of all time, Helen Glover. And I'm thrilled to finally get a chance to write about her because I truly believe she's the most underrated character of all time. And I'm talking males or females here. In terms of pure entertainment and character development, I just don't think it got much better than Helen Glover. Why did I like Helen so much? Well, mainly it was because she was such an anomaly. On the one hand, she came off like this prim little New England schoolmarm. She had a short fuse with people, she wasn't tolerant or patient in the slightest, and she would bite your head off if she disagreed with anything you said. Plus, she seemed like a bit of a prude, so there was that side to her, which was entertaining enough in itself. But on the other side, you had this extremely emotional and giddy little schoolgirl who would just jump up and down at the slightest bit of good news or would squeal with delight if her husband got to come and stay on the island. If Helen got the tiniest bit of good news during this game, she would turn into Squealy McGigglefest. And it was such a strange switch from the pissed-off schoolmarm that she normally showed to the cameras. So anyway, that's why I liked Helen Glover so much. She was entertaining, she was unpredictable, she was likable. Plus, as a bonus, she would give these incredibly pained confessionals when things didn't go her way. Like Rupert, she was almost entirely id-driven. When she was upset, she was really upset. When she was happy, she was really happy. Her heart was always very visible on her sleeve, and that's the type of character who makes her some outstanding TV. The only problem with Helen is that nobody really cares about Thailand. Yeah, it's kind of true. In other words, people tend to forget about her. And it's an awful shame, because she was one of the best. It's Helen's complete inability to hide her anger. This is after she lost the Final Four immunity challenge. The Helen moment that makes the list at number 75 is her showdown with Brian at the final Tribal Council. If you remember because it was... I'm sure you remember it, because it was one of the best moments of the entire season. If you don't remember it, here's the recap. Helen and Brian were tight allies all throughout Survivor Thailand. They were two hardest workers around camp. They were both extremely bright and strategic players, and they trusted one another implicitly all the way to the end. They were destined to be the final two players in Thailand. Helen and Brian, BFF. Well, that was Helen's intention anyway. She planned to stick it with Brian all the way to the final two. But as for Brian, well, let's just say his strategy was exactly the opposite. His strategy involved Helen leaving the game at the Final Four, and that's exactly what happened at the start of the Thailand finale. Helen was blindsided at the Final Four, and Brian was Brian was the one who put the biggest of the three knives in her back. Brian's message to Helen before the Final Four: the fateful vote. I forgot that that's what the immunity necklace was. It was that big. So Helen was blindsided. She didn't see it coming, and it hit her smack between the eyes. And it's safe to say she wasn't really all that thrilled about it, especially because she had some of the most memorable final words of all time. Helen's furious reaction to being voted off, and Helen's wonderful final words. To the three of you left in the game, I just want to say break a leg, and I mean it. Since Helen always had, shall we say, a temper problem, it was pretty obvious that she was going to come after Brian with a vengeance in the final jury. She knew it, Brian knew it, hell, we all knew it. The Helen Glover jury speech was just going to be a thing of beauty, and we watched her sitting there at the next tribal council knowing full well what was going through her head. The look on her face was pure disgust towards Brian. You just couldn't mistake it for anything else. See below. She was listening to Brian talk. She wouldn't even look at him. Helen rolling her eyes at something Brian's saying. And then it finally happened. Brian ended up being in the final two, and much to our delight, Helen finally got a chance to confront him. We expected a memorable performance from her, and that's exactly what she delivered. Helen gave us a moment to be remembered when she squared off against Brian at a final tribal council. I'm not going to recap the whole conversation here, other than saying that Helen was mad at Brian for breaking his word to her without so much as a warning on the way out. No, instead of recapping, I'm just going to show you the pictures of Helen's face during her angry tirade. Because in 12 seasons of Survivor, I don't think there's been a more entertaining jury performance. She bobbed, she weaved, she yelled. She was like freaking Muhammad Ali. And the very best was at the end, when she got so mad she even growled. She literally growled. She gets so angry that Jeff had to tell her to back off and actually let Brian have a chance to answer her questions. It was really a sight to behold. I forgot about that. Helen Glover was always the master of the exaggerated facial expression. You could always tell her mood just by looking at her face. If you don't believe me, just check out the evidence below. This is Helen Glover, unplugged.
See, I always love going back to this. The final episode of Thailand with especially the jury. It's a lot of fun to see.
Brian can do little bits. But sit there and wait for her to finish. I like how the lighting on Brian here. By the way.
Yeah.
This is my favorite part. This is where Helen growls at him and Jeff has to tell her to back off. So anyway, Helen finally gets Brian to apologize for what he did, and then she caps off her performance by replying to his apology with a snippy but good-natured, "Well, it's a little late now." And I have to say, this quote always cracks me up. Just check out Helen's exaggerated facial expressions when she says this.
Yeah.
Well, it's a little late now. So anyway, that's the Helen Glover experience. Her animated showdown and complete intimidation of Brian ended up being one of my favorite moments of Survivor Thailand. P.S. Like I said, Helen was one of my favorites in terms of a player who can consistently make me laugh. She was funny without even trying to be funny. In fact, I would rank her right up there with Sandra as the two funniest females they've ever had on the show. I'd probably rank Katie from Palau, who unlike the other two tried very hard to be funny, at number 3. PPS. Earlier I called Helen the most underrated female ever in terms of being entertaining. If I had to make a male to say the same thing about, I'd probably pick Clarence from Africa. Don't worry, we'll get to him later in the list. I don't know who that is.
He's the subject of Beangate.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Oh, Beangate. Oh, okay. PPPS. Oh, yeah. And Helen is also one of the coolest survivors in real life. She was a big fan of All-Star Survivor Alaska, a story I wrote a few years ago with her in it. Helen liked my story so much that she traded me her recipe for butterscotch cookie bars, the one she talked about during Thailand, for a paper copy of Survivor Alaska. Wow. So if you're reading this, thanks again, Helen. That's awesome. What a cool lady.
Mm-hmm. I feel like has PPS and PPPS, has that been retired?
The postscript, postscript, postscript. I don't know.
I don't see that anymore.
I would still. I probably, if I was writing, like jokingly, I would probably still use that. Okay. I've always loved it. I've always found it very fun. So, but that's just me.
All right. Well, I always loved the Thailand finale. It's always fun to go back to.
I need to go back and watch that. Yeah, that's that.
Even just go watching our reaction to it. It's always fun too. I like watching it back because I kept most of that in because that's the best part of probably the season, honestly. Number 74, Superpole 2000 from Borneo episode 2. This is an old school one.
I like the name. I'll say.
Yeah,
oh no!
Dr.
I remember
Sean.
this now. Yes, Superpole. I remember this now. Oh my gosh.
Borneo was the hardest of the Survivor seasons to write about, mainly because it was presented like a documentary. There was very little fancy editing, there weren't that many witty quotes, and for the most part the players didn't go out of their way to be mean to one another. It was very much a survival-type documentary for the first 6 weeks, and that's why it doesn't have the same type of humor level as most of the later seasons. Borneo started off much more like a sociological experiment. It didn't start off like an entertaining, over-the-top grudge match. It just wasn't the same type of TV show, and that's why there aren't many Borneo moments in the countdown. However, then we have the case of Sean Kenneth. Dr. Sean.
There he is, Dr. Sean.
Yes, that's right, Dr. Sean. The guy with the alphabet strategy. The guy that Sue repeatedly referred to as dumbass. The guy that built the bowling alley. That guy.
Oh, yeah, the alphabet strategy. Oh.
Sean seems like a really nice guy in real life. In fact, he was probably too nice for a game like Survivor. The guy just was incapable of making any enemies, hence the ridiculous spineless alphabet strategy, which I'll talk about much, much later on this list. I liked Sean a lot, but unfortunately he did a few things during his time in Borneo that really didn't look so good on TV. He did a lot of things that were just sort of weird. The other players didn't like him, the editors and producers clearly didn't like him, and unfortunately for Sean, this turned him into the unintentional comedy champion of the first season. No matter what he tried or how charming he tried to be, he really came off looking like a big dork. And this is where we come to Superpole. Superpole 2000 was Sean's invention during the second episode of Survivor. It was a fishing pole, you see, only it was a lot bigger than a normal pole, plus it had a built-in rod and reel, hence the super part of the name. This wasn't just a mundane old fishing pole. Oh no, this was Superpole 2000, and it lands Sean the coveted spot at number 74.
I remember laughing a lot about this when we were watching this together. Superpole.
Sean demonstrates one of Superpole's many features to clearly impress Susan Hawk. And Sean in Superpole 2000 in action. Why was Superpole so goofy? Well, for one, because Sean never actually caught a fish. He never caught a fish. He never even hooked a fish. Hell, he never even had a nibble. Superpole 2000 was a complete and utter disaster. I thought he was going to say he never caught a fish or even cleaned a dish.
Or even cleaned a dish.
Sue making fun of Sean in Superpole. But Superpole's repeated failures didn't deter Sean in the slightest. No, he built up his invention every single chance he got. We heard about Superpole all the time. We often heard about its many features, starting with the man's grip that Sean demonstrated so proudly at the start of episode 2. Sean demonstrates the man's grip. Meanwhile, God looks on in silent approval.
That's the sun in the background, the shining beam light. God looking on in silent approval.
Sean also defended Superpole to the cameras. He was very defensive about his invention. At one time, he even suggested the only reason he wasn't catching anything was because maybe the area has been overfished or something. That's right, it has been overfished. Welcome to the world of Dr. Sean. Remember this quote in defense of Superpole? That's saying there's a lot of fish in the sea. Well, not this sea. Whoever said that didn't grow up in Palau Tiga. Superpole also factored into one of my favorite quotes from Borneo, because a few episodes later, Tagi won fishing gear, and Richard was thrilled about getting the chance to go spearfishing. Richard was absolutely chomping at the bit to go out and catch the tribe some fish. But Sean was having none of it. You see, Sean knew that the ocean was empty. It had been overfished, remember? And Sean also knew that they had already had Superpole. So what good were Richard and his stupid fishing spear anyway? After all, according to Dr. Sean, we don't need Rich. We have Superpole. So anyway, that was that. Richard went on to catch infinity fish, and Superpole never did get a single nibble. It was the complete opposite of a good invention. It even met a sad fate when Richard and Kelly burned it in the Borneo finale. That's right. The editors were so enamored by Superpole 2000 that they gave us a nice, lingering, poignant shot of its final moments in the fire during the last episode. Death to Superpole. Fare thee well, Superpole 2000. Fare thee very well indeed.
Oh, I forgot. That brought back a lot of really fun memories that made me laugh so
Borneo
much.
would be interesting to rewatch now, because it really was so different from seasons to come.
Yeah, I like that we have Superpole. We don't need Rich. Oh, good stuff.
He's right. It was very documentary style too.
It was, yeah.
People just doing things, you know.
Yeah.
Number 73.
It's Pascal and Sean's Marquesan Barbecue. Marquesas, episode 9. This is one of my favorite moments of Marquesas, and it also happened to be one of the most genuinely touching. In fact, this is the type of scenes that they honestly don't have a lot of on Survivor anymore. The show ceased trying to be deep and emotional a long time ago. Nowadays, it's just mainly concerned just with strategy, but it didn't used to be that way. In fact, on a Marquesan beach back in 2002, a black kid from Harlem and a white judge from Georgia had one of the most emotionally moving rewards we've ever seen on Survivor. It was Pascal and Sean, unlikely reward partners. It was the 9th episode of Marquesas, and the players were competing for a Marquesan barbecue. There were 8 players left in the game, so they were randomly split into 2 teams of 4, or 4 teams of 2. Boy, I don't know how I flipped that around. 4 teams of 2, and that's how we ended up with Sean Rector, an angry young black teacher from Harlem, being paired with Pascal English, a conservative old white judge from the South. It was the most unlikely of pairings, yet Pascal and Sean came through as a team to win the challenge. And better yet, they won the reward. So here we have 2 guys with absolutely nothing in common, yet they find themselves thrust together on the reward trip of a lifetime. They are off to watch a Marquesan pig roast, and they are going to have a great time. But unfortunately, the trip gets off to a rocky start. The problem is that Pascal and Sean have to get to the feast via horseback, but Sean has never ridden a horse before in his life. He even takes the time to explain this to us. He says, "The only horse I've ever been on is the merry-go-round in Central Park." So Sean tries to mount his horse, and he's immediately spooked when he realizes he has no control over what this animal is going to do. Panicked, Sean insists on running with one of the Marquesan guys instead. And there's this incredibly funny shot of Sean clinging. I remember this now. Of clinging for his dear life to the back of a Marquesian. No matter who is running with him, Sean just isn't comfortable on the back of a horse at all. What a great shot. Despite Sean's fears, this new strategy, clinging to somebody else, seems like it will work on paper. After all, how hard can it be to hold on to another rider? How much work will Sean really have to do? Well, what Sean didn't take into account is the fact that his balls are going to be racked in this particular position. He didn't plan for physics in this new seating arrangement, and now Sean's balls are paying the ultimate price. Sean getting rack-jacked. I like how the guy at the tribesman is just like... Sean even tries to share this news with his seatmate. He very respectfully and very politely says to the Marquesian, my balls, they really hurt. My balls really hurt, sir. So anyway, this new approach doesn't really work. Sean's nads hurt too much, and it just isn't worth it for the extra security. So instead, he ends up back on his own horse, with the Marquesians pulling him with a piece of rope. It isn't the most glamorous way to ride on a horse, but at least Sean can say he rode one. And as a bonus, he even ends the trip with both of his testicles. That is a bonus, yeah. And, Sean's triumphant arrival at the Marquesian village. Sean's adventure with a horse was funny enough to make the list on its own, but his experience at the barbecue was amusing enough to be mentioned as well. Because for one, Sean was just an incredible motor mouth at the feast. He sat there and he provided a hilarious, non-stop running commentary for just about everything that happened throughout the meal. The highlight for me was when Sean hit on the female hostess at the start. You're a bit too young for me. But I also enjoyed his Mystery Science Theater-style commentary when the Marquesian host was explaining what they were going to be doing. Sean was simply at the top of his game here, and the fact that he and Pascal ended up trying to dance with food stuffed in their pants was just icing on the cake. This is simply a dynamite comedic sequence all around. Sean being presented with a big-ass coconut. Sean shaking hands Harlem style with a Marquesian chief. Sean's running Mystery Science Theater style commentary during the chief's introduction speech. Oh, so then we're going to do that. And then we're going to eat this. All right, I got you. Mm-hmm. Sean's impression of how much food they're going to eat at the barbecue ceremony. In the end, Pascal and Sean's barbecue trip was one of the most heartfelt bonding moments I've ever seen on Survivor. These are two guys from absolute different walks of life who had a chance to meet one another and enjoy each other's company on a day they were never really going to forget. It's a type of character interaction that they don't show anymore on Survivor, and that's a shame. But for me, it was also one of the funniest scenes involving one of the funniest characters, Sean, in Survivor Marquesas. This was Sean's greatest moment in an already outstanding season, and I really think he should have been invited to play in All-Stars. Mm-hmm. I wholeheartedly agree. It's very sad that he was not. He was a great player.
Yeah, he's the clearest biggest missing one for me, and yeah, this was always we loved this when we were watching this too. This relationship.
Yeah. I remember we both were like really. It was quite touching. It really was.
Yeah, because it's like, there's actually the beauty of Survivor is you're bringing all these people from different walks of life together. Yeah, you can have moments like that. So
yeah.
All right, number 72, Karen sucks. Big Katie Gallagher fan, huh?
It's an interesting choice. I liked her sass. I mean, she was an entertaining character.
Yeah, I felt like she tried too hard sometimes, and she was also just mean.
She just it was grating. I think was because she did it. It was more like rare, like Mean Girls kind of mean, as opposed to Rob, who was like mean, but he had like a smile on his face the whole time.
Yeah.
Or like Johnny Fairplay, who was just conniving and also had a smile on his face the whole time.
Mm-hmm. Moments like these in isolation are funny though. But just overall, it was hard to appreciate them as much because she was just always saying mean things, and just sometimes they would be funny, you know.
Yeah.
Like all of Katie Gallagher's quotes, this one was short, blunt, and right to the point. Shirley wasn't one to waste words, was she? The ever-tart Katie Gallagher. It was the 11th episode of Palau, and the women were looking to band together. There were 4 women, Jen, Stephanie, Katie, and Karen. There were 3 men, Ian, Tom, Greg. And by all rights, it should have been a no-brainer. The women could have joined together. They could have picked the men off one by one. And by all rights, the season could have very easily had a female winner. All the women had to do was band together. The women of Crow were planning to take the game away from the men. The only problem was that Karen, the civil rights lawyer from Chicago who looked like Barbara Streisand, wasn't into the all-female thing. Karen had an allegiance to Tom. Karen wasn't down with the Women's Alliance, and Karen squealed their plans to Tom the very first chance she had. Karen ratted them out to give herself more prestige with the man in charge, Tom. Karen telling Tom what the girls are up to. And Karen ruined the female alliance's plans, and this tactic earned her most hated villain status among the women of Karor. It was especially not received well by the season's Venom mistress, Katie Gallagher. So she sat right down to tell us about it. And one of my favorite but blunt quotes of the season, Katie politely informed us that we can't get a female alliance together because Karen sucks. Well, all right then. Thanks, Katie. Sucks. This is definitely true. Like, this is definitely a moment where it's like, yeah, I'm with Katie on this one. Because it really was like that for... It probably was like the best for all of them just to stick together, honestly. Like, obviously, it was not best for Karen to go back to Tom because she ended up going out at Final Four, as expected.
Yeah.
And, all the women would have had a much better shot if they just banded together there.
It's just for whatever reason, I don't know.
Karen sucks.
She's good, well, yeah.
It's a good moment.
She did sacks.
Number 71.
All right, Heidi and Jenna's handicap, Amazon episode 11.
Yes.
Yes, the famous duo of Heidi and Jenna. They'll show up a few times on this list, Heidi especially. But this moment at number 71 is one that nearly everyone remembers. It was the time they referred to beauty as a survivor handicap. Yep. I do remember this. Remember this scene? Of course you do. It was the moment you first probably wanted to smack them. First Heidi and then Jenna. Even though Jenna was the one who technically said it first. Because Jenna was the one who flat out said it, that she and Heidi had to work twice as hard as everyone else because they were both so beautiful. Jenna made this comment at Tribal Council. Heidi agreed, and millions of viewers collectively rolled their eyes in collective response. In fact, sitting at home in California, Chad Crittenden may have even opened his mouth in shocked horror when he first heard this. Jenna tells us that beauty is a detriment in a game like Survivor. The smartest person in the world agrees. Giggle. Why was Jenna's quote so offensive at the time? I mean, it wasn't that bad, was it? Saying that beauty is really a handicap? Well, the main reason this quote was so inappropriate was because there was a real-life handicapped person sitting there right in front of her. Christy Smith, who was deaf, heard Jenna's comment, and she did not appreciate Jenna's implication that extreme beauty was on the same page as lack of hearing. In fact, Christy later came down on Jenna pretty hard during the final tribal council, and she did it specifically because of this quote. Do you mean to tell me that being pretty is the same as being deaf? Are you honestly trying to say it's the exact same thing? Needless to say, Christy was understandably a wee bit upset. Christy Smith, handicapped. Jenna Maraska, not handicapped. Heidi Strobel, not handicapped. Maybe somewhat handicapped. To be fair, I do understand what Jenna was trying to say. And I understand that it just came off poorly. But man, Jenna and Heidi had so many "I didn't mean it like that" quotes during Amazon that at a certain point you had to just stop excusing them. After a while, it was like, do you really have any idea what's coming out of your mouth? Do you really think you should be saying this in front of Christy? I mean, she's sitting there right in front of you, and you're talking about Survivor handicaps. Did Jenna just think that maybe Christy wasn't going to hear? That's a good thing all the fat women back at camp can't hear us making fun of them. Jenna's quote about Survivor handicaps was funny enough on its own, in an inappropriate Chad has a leg up sort of way. But what really sent this moment into the comedy stratosphere was Rob Sesternino's response just a few seconds later. Because Rob recognized another BS Jenna Heidi quote the minute he heard it. And that's how he won the hearts of a million viewers when he decided to rebut Jenna a few seconds later with, Jeff, I was lucky in this game that I'm not handsome, so I didn't have any handicaps like the girls found. Jenna reacts to Rob's comment. That's great. What a Chad. What a great moment. This beauty is our handicap moment was the Heidi and Jenna moment that really pushed them over the top as players you honestly wanted to smack. Because it wasn't enough that every female over 30 already hated them. Older women have more fat so they can work twice as hard as we can. And it wasn't enough that all the viewers at home already hated them. The deaf girl took my letter. That was so selfish of her. Oh my gosh, I forgot about that. No, after the 11th episode of Survivor the Amazon, now all people with actual disabilities also hated them too. With the inclusion of the famous handicap line, Jenna and Heidi somehow pulled off the hard-to-achieve hated Survivor player trifecta, and it made for one of the more memorable subplots during Amazon. Oh, and to this day, Amazon remains the only season with a handicapped winner. Oh, hey, we got one of my favorite screen caps here. Yes,
Yeah,
Jabaru was it? Had so many players with handicaps that they actually had their own little scene handicap bathing facility. Check it out. There's Jenna, Shauna, and Heidi in the handicap bathtub.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, yeah. The cameraman really liked this scene. You can tell they really enjoyed it. Special disclaimer note: yes, I know that Jenna never actually used the word handicap. She never actually used the word, but the sentiment was definitely implied. So yes, I know she never used the exact word. Only Rob did. Just in case you want to be a stickler about this, and you probably will.
Mm-hmm. Classic moment.
Wow. Yeah, it was a lot.
There was a lot of that with Jen and Heidi for sure. Yeah,
Lot
with
lot of
the
shade about on Heidi here, which I'm really appreciating.
yeah, because he cited Heidi as one of those unintentionally funny people
Yeah.
before, because like the lack of self awareness there.
Yeah.
She thinks she's the smartest person in the world. There was like the question in the finale where she was like, "Who else would deserve to be in the final two if it weren't for you?" And Jenna says Rob, and then Matt says Rob, and she's like, anybody else? Like she's looking for them to say that she deserves to be in the final two.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Number 70, Burton's pointing at my ass. This is when Rupert was wearing that skirt, and they were
Yeah,
making
that's right.
fun of him.
This is great.
It's the fourth episode of Survivor Pearl Islands, and things are going very well for the Drakes. They have won every immunity challenge thus far. They are steamrolling the hapless Morgans, and it's a near certainty that a Drake is going to win this game. Nothing can possibly stop them at this point. The only problem is that not all is rosy among the ranks of the Drakes. There are problems brewing under the surface. Oh, we may not have seen them yet, but there are definitely problems. For one, John and Sandra can't be within 5 feet of one another without a shouting match ensuing. They practically already have a dual restraining order against one another at this point. The second big problem is that the Drakes are simply bored. This is a cutthroat bunch of players, you see, and it's killing them not to be able to vote people out of the game. Survivor without tribal council is not Survivor at all, and nowhere is it more evident than on the beaches of Camp Drake. But the third problem around camp, this is where it starts to get frightening. This is where our blood starts to go cold, because the third big problem in Camp Drake is something so serious, so insidious, and so chilling that it can only be described by the big man himself, Rupert Boneham. Only the sage and wise words of Rupert can properly convey the horror that awaited just underneath the lily-white surface of the Drake. Rupert? So I'm standing there, and all of a sudden I turn around, and there's Burton pointing at my ass. That's right, Burton was pointing at his ass. In all my years of watching Survivor, I can't think of a more ridiculous yet endearing image than that of Burton Roberts with his finger less than 2 feet from Rupert's ass crack. Burton is in hysterics. He's trying to get John to play along, and it's so incredibly first grade that I can't believe we actually saw it on TV. In fact, it is one of my all-time favorite Survivor images. There's Rupert in a skirt. There's John looking on, and there's Burton, the ass pointer, and he's leaning backwards and guffawing like a fucking James Bond villain. Please don't get me wrong here. I'm not making fun of the fact that Burton was mocking Rupert. I'm sure Rupert has had enough of that in his lifetime. So far, be it for me to pile on more humiliation. No, what I'm making fun of is the fact that Burton was literally pointing and laughing at somebody's ass crack like he was 7 years old and they were on the playground at school. Because when is the last time you saw a grown adult pointing and laughing at somebody? I mean, outside of an Adam Sandler movie, does that ever happen in real life? Don't adults usually have a little more decorum than that?
Yes.
But no, not Burton. Burton will forever be known as the guy who pointed at Rupert's ass and then chuckled heartily. It is one of my favorite Survivor images. Burton in a rare non-ass pointing moment. By the way, I enjoyed this image so much that I thought it would be fun to come up with some other things that Burton could point and laugh at. Since he's already being a jackass, why not find some other things he can make fun of to his friend John? So I did my best to come up with the most inappropriate Burton images possible. See if you can top any of these. Here's Burton mocking the Hindenburg explosion. Here's Burton making fun of Terry Schiavo.
Shivo.
There's Burton enjoying the sinking of the Titanic. Look, John Wilkes Booth shot him in the head. Ha ha ha. Dude, that baby is crying. Ha ha. So anyway, thanks, Burton. The image of your finger directed towards Rupert's ass was one of the most childish yet personally fulfilling things I've ever seen on Survivor. Thinking about it is actually making me misty-eyed. P.S. Of course, I also enjoyed Sean's comment about how Rupert's food would always end up in his beard. That one ranks just slightly behind the ass pointing on the scale of things a 7-year-old or Heidi would say about Rupert. Personally, I'm surprised Sean and Burton didn't just take his lunchbox and call him a poopy head. Yes.
It's a lot. That's a lot of a moment. That's for
It's
sure.
so funny because Burton, Burton went from that moment to actually coming back in the game and then being in contention for winning, like very late in the game. All right, we'll do one more each. Right, number 69.
Okay. 69, nice. What Tom misses the most? Tom Buchanan was probably the best player ever at coming up with some random yet wildly inappropriate quote for the camera, and this is one of his best. It's also the funniest moment in Africa that nobody remembers. In fact, I had completely forgotten about it until I went back to rewatch this season for purposes of this countdown. It's the 11th episode in Africa, and the players are really missing their loved ones. They just got videos from home, everybody is homesick, and it's an especially dramatic episode all around. The 6 remaining castaways really miss their families right about now, and Jeff decides to capitalize on this fact at Tribal Council. He knows a good dramatic moment when he sees one, and he knows that tugging at the viewer's heartstrings will make for an especially powerful TV moment. So Jeff decides to prompt the players a little bit for response. He wants them to talk about what they're missing back home. Without thinking, I'm going to give you a question. Give me the first thing that comes to your mind. When you think about home, what do you miss most? Jeff catches the players off guard with this change in Tribal Council protocol, and one by one they are put on the spot. They have to quickly come up with the most cherished memory back home. Most of the answers are somewhat predictable, of course. Ethan, my couch. Teresa, my children. Kim Johnson, the ability to be totally relaxed. Lex, wife and kids, no doubt. Kim Powers, my mom. Then we come to Big Tom. Tom Buchanan isn't the type to be all sentimental. No, he decides he's going to ruin this moment for the producers and try to get a laugh instead. So he pauses for a second. He gets this sneaky little grin on his face. And he comes up with something that nobody at Tribal Council expects. Cheeseburger. This quote always makes me laugh. Because it's such an obvious attempt to ruin the drama, and it comes completely out of nowhere. It actually takes a very serious episode, indeed one of the most serious of the season, and turns it into a big joke. In fact, this quote is especially funny because you don't even consider the fact that players can say anything other than my loving family and kids. So to hear Big Tom crack a joke in such an emotional moment is such a jarring shift in tone that it makes the scene all the funnier. The Motomajis reacting to Tom's cheeseburger joke. Big Tom is the only person who could have ruined the family moment with a food joke, and he's the only one who could have done it without getting yelled at by the producers. In fact, the fact that they even aired this quote on TV at all just shows you how enamored the producers were with Big Tom. Anybody else, and I guarantee this line gets cut from the final episode. I'm trying to remember what was going on in that episode. I do, but that rings a bell of like it being a somber episode all together.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Was it on the same episode that they just they got their letter or message from home?
Maybe. Yeah, I think you'd said that before.
Like
yeah.
That, yeah. That's fun.
Yeah, videos from home. Everybody's homesick. Yeah. So.
Probably something with that then.
Yeah, and then just cheeseburger.
All right, now last one for today. Number 68, Rupert Boneham.
Just Rupert. Period.
He's one of the 115 funniest things to ever happen on Survivor.
He's a moment machine, honestly.
Yeah, I mean, he's gold. He's gold.
He is.
That beard, that face, that skirt, that growl, those big sad basset hound eyes, that roar. Who else could I be talking about? That's right, it's the one and only Rupert Boneham, or as I like to call him, the single most unique person ever to be cast in Survivor. I know you're probably sick of the Rupert media overkill. Heck, so am I. And I bet Rupert pretty much is sick of it too. There's no denying the fact that Rupert was a star, and Rupert brought the goods in every single episode of Pearl Islands. When people get overexposed in the media, there's generally a good reason for it. It's because they were interesting to watch the first time around. And I'll be the first one to stand up and say that Rupert kicked ass. Rupert Boneham was this dynamite Survivor character. Always was, always will be. The entire Pearl Island season revolved around him. He factored into just about every single event during the season, and he had that certain special trait that all my favorite characters have ever had. Know what it was? Simple. He was entertaining without trying to be. Rupert made us laugh. He captivated our attention. He stole every single minute of camera time, yet he wasn't even trying to do it. Rupert thought he was just this fat little kid playing pirate, but somehow he ended up being funny without trying to be funny. He was entertaining without trying to be entertaining. He was the hero without trying to be the hero, and that's why he's arguably the most memorable and entertaining and beloved survivor of all time. In other words, you couldn't have made up a character like Rupert if you had tried.
Nope. I agree with basically everything you just said there. That's pretty true.
Mm-hmm. There was one Rupert trait that really stood out for me, however, and it's the reason he made it to number 68 on this list, and it's something that not a lot of people remember. Oh, sure, you might think about Rupert, remember the beard, or the tie-dye, or the bipolar shifts in temperament, but do you remember the way he talked? Do you remember the quirky way he phrased things? Yes, I do. It all started in this Pearl Island's bio page at CBS.com. That was the first time I realized this guy didn't always speak the same language as the rest of us, because right there under his favorites, written in Rupert's own weird phraseology, was this wonderful gem. Favorite non-alcoholic beverage, 2% cow's milk. Cow's milk? Cow's milk? Who the fuck has to specify that he's talking about cow's milk? Is there a large society of goat milk drinkers out in Indiana? Are people drinking penguin milk? What the hell? So right away I knew that Rupert was going to be unique. Any person who has to specify that he's talking about cow's milk is somebody I can fully get behind as a Survivor character. And I was not to be disappointed. Remember these oddly phrased Rupertisms from the first few episodes of Pearl Islands? It was almost as if English wasn't really his first language, because if he wasn't making up sentence structure, he was making up words. And if he wasn't making up words, he was making up inflection, a la Christopher Walken. And if he wasn't doing any of that, sometimes he was just growling for no apparent reason. But no matter what he did, it all boiled down to the same thing time and time again. No matter what he said, this Rupert guy was just entertaining as all hell whenever he opened his mouth. My personal favorite Rupertisms. And so I stole for the Drake. Yes. These jeans were eating my crotch.
Yeah.
John's like one of my kids back at home. He just pops off about stupid stuff.
Yeah.
We had a feast and we had a big old hunk of lamb. A saltwater catfish? I didn't know they made such an animal.
I love that one. I love that so much.
From All Stars. I caught a fish. I poked it with a stick. I caught a fish. There are plenty more Rupertisms out there, but these were the ones that particularly warmed my heart. I especially like the one about a hunk of lamb. That quote could not have been said by anybody else. But besides all the quotes above, there are plenty of other Rupert moments that weren't mentioning during Pearl Islands. Remember Rupert's giant emotional swings? He would go from completely happy to completely sad. There was no such thing as an emotion in the middle. It was all or nothing with him at all times, especially when he was upset about something. Remember when he nearly cried at the third Drake Tribal Council? Keep in mind that he wasn't just doing this for the camera. Rupert was literally about to start crying. Yeah. Rupert had big highs. Rupert had big lows. He also let loose the most spectacularly mournful sighs of despair. Oh, and plus he had weird quotes. But one of my favorite Rupert moments came in the 9th episode when Burton didn't pick him to go on reward. That's right. Rupert was so upset that he didn't get picked that he went on a little mini rant. But the funny thing was that, for once, he didn't do it out loud. No, he decided to rant to himself under his breath, kind of like Milton in the movie Office Space. It was just the funniest thing. Here's Rupert, pissed off at the world and at Burton in particular, and he's mumbling threats under his breath like the way Milton talked about his red swing line stapler. My wife and I always referred to this as Rupert's Milton tantrum. It's one of our personal favorite moments of the season. Mumbling. That'll teach me to do nice things for Burton anymore. See if I take him on any more rewards. They better not take my red swing line stapler. I was told I could listen to my radio at a reasonable volume. I'll burn this place down right now. So anyway, here's to Rupert Boneham and all the quirkiness, quotes, and eccentricity he brought to the show. It's a shame that media overkill has turned a lot of fans against him over the past few years, because Rupert is and always will be a Survivor superstar. In fact, this boot episode might be the single best Survivor episode of all time. So he makes the list at number 68 just for being himself. There's no way he could have been anybody but 2% cow milks drinking Rupert Boneham. So much for my dreams. Those are his last words.
Bravo. I agree. This whole thing was extremely well written, and I totally agree. Yeah, I bet it was probably because Rupert then came back for All Stars. Rupert won that Survivor, the favorite thing where he won $1 million.
Yes.
So yeah, I can understand. Probably it was probably a lot at the time. Everything was Rupert all the time for Survivor. And he's really right, because the entire season revolved around him, because like after he's gone, like all the events that take place after that is all you feel like the wake. It's all like events of the wake of post Rupert. Like that's what it all feels like.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of crazy how
It's a big tone shift, yeah.
Yeah, it's really interesting. But that and yeah, that's why Pearl Islands is one of my favorite so far.
Mm-hmm. I will say something.
Rupert really makes it.
Something I feel like you can actually see in how he's in Pearl Islands versus All Stars that he talks about here, where he is so good because he's not trying to be entertaining. I feel like going into All Stars, he might have lost a little bit of that charm because he's coming in known as I am Rupert. This is what I do, you know.
Right.
So then he's expected to do things. He's expected to. You could see him doing the roar at the reunion and stuff because that's what he was known for, you know. So it loses a little bit of the charm there. So I could see that not being as charming. But like Pearl Islands, if you just look at that by itself, it's like it's golden character, man.
For sure.
Lightning in a bottle. One of the most unique person ever cast so far. Yeah, I would probably say so.
Yeah, he does not see the world in the same way that the rest of us do. But it's not in a weird or off-putting way like
Brian Heidick.
What's his name there? Brian Heidick or the other guy that he was already on the list where he talked weirdly. The receptacle, the beverage or the food receptacles or whatever he called it, food containment.
Why am I completely blanking?
I'm completely blanking on his name. I'm blanking on his name. Oh my gosh.
Food receptacles.
Yeah, you don't remember him talking about that?
Just now?
No, it wasn't just now. It was back towards the beginning in the first and his mom chided him at like, don't be so polite.
Matt from Amazon.
Matt, there we go. Matt from Amazon.
Well, Rupert,
he's an interesting character, but he was more off-putting.
Rupert's a star. He's a star.
Yeah, really. Rupert's just wholesome.
And Pearl Islands, yeah. I mean, there's plenty of fun characters in Pearl Islands, but yeah, Rupert is the main character. You know?
Yeah.
So
yeah, for sure.
It's awesome. He's awesome. I'll forever be grateful for him in Pearl Islands for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that's it for now. For a while.
That's it.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you're interested, we are going to be starting our reaction series to Survivor Panama. I have seen it, but Alec has not, so I'm taking him along through it. That'll be fun.
Be good.
Each week we'll be doing a new episode in that season. So we won't be doing any more of these until sometime after the season. Who knows when exactly, but we'll have Survivor every week. It'll be fun. Looking forward to actually getting back to watching Survivor with you because it's been like 2 months now.
Yeah, it's been about 2 months since we took some time, watched through the most recent episode. Recent by recent to us, recent to me. We made it through the 3rd season of Black Mirror. Because that's kind of what we've been doing in between seasons. Little stopgap but definitely itching to get back into the Survivor flow for sure. So
that'll be fun because it's like we didn't get to see all the moments, but like there's so many moments, and this is just the first 11 seasons, right?
Mm-hmm.
The show's 43 seasons in right now. There's a lot more to get to for us. A lot more fun times to be had, fun characters to be introduced to. So yeah. We'll definitely thank you and shout out to Mario Lanza for writing these. We'll definitely finish at some point. It might take a while for us to get through, but definitely we'll come back to it.
For sure. This has been very entertaining. Love the writing style. It's been a lot of fun to read through for sure. So I look forward to returning to this in the future.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, that's it for now.
All right.
Okay.
All right.
If you enjoyed this video, why don't you go check out our reaction to the finale of Survivor Thailand. Okay, so you can see that very moment. You can see Helen laying into Brian. in its
I'd want to
entirety.
go see it. I'm
Yeah.
gonna go back and watch it again.
I
Honestly,
generally do just go back to our reactions and just rewatch some of them because it's fun.
Yeah.
Reliving some of those older seasons. It's always wild to think about. Like I have so many options because we have done 7 seasons now. Thailand, Amazon, Pearl Islands, All Stars, Vanuatu, Palau, and Guatemala. 7 seasons.
Wow.
That's crazy.
Yeah, that's a lot. And reviewed the first 3.
Yeah, 4.
First 4.
So.
Oh yeah. A lot of Survivor yet to come. That's for sure.
Yeah, so
I'm not getting tired of this anytime soon. So
thank you if you joined us through this series, and thank you for the comments. There was someone who gave me a heads up that there was a spoiler in a later one. Luckily, we didn't end up getting to it anyway, and we won't get to it till after the spoiler anyway. So that's good, worked out. But so if you joined us, there is a playlist on our channel with all of our Survivor videos. If you want to just dive in, whatever you're interested in, there's a lot to choose from.
That's a lot. It's a lot of content. That's for sure.
And we do reviews. We do discussions on movies, TV, video games, so many different things. So there's a lot each week to enjoy.
Stick around.
Yeah.
Subscribe.
Yeah. Hit the notification bell. Like the video if you enjoyed it. Leave a comment letting us know what you think. And click the links in the description for our social media. Okay?
All right.
See you next week, Survivor Panama.